Hey, welcome to the game Asylum, and today's video needs no introduction because it's very good at telling you what it is. See? And yeah, talking about Resident Evil is redundant, as it's a famous game and it's been done to death in this space, and the franchise as a whole, like its antagonists, refuses to die. But just like the bad smell of these shambling corpses, it's a series that has been a constant in my life, and was instrumental in shaping my tastes. Without Resident Evil and its ilk, I probably wouldn't be here speaking into a microphone, wondering why I do this for a creative outlet. July 24th, 1998, the Alpha team of the Elite Special Forces unit, STARS, is on the lookout for its sister unit, who went missing after being sent to investigate a series of murders in the Arklay Mountains, with reports that these victims of these killings were eaten by a group of crazed vegans. Luckily for us, this tangent gets derailed by a red shirt getting his tonsils torn out by a pack of rubber dogs, causing the rest of this group to nope the fuck out and sprint towards an ominous mansion. But honestly, who gives a shit about this dry exposition to pad out the runtime? We have a sick cast intro.
Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, Wesker, Resident Evil.
Hell yeah! While we calm down from that fire emoji intro, the leader of this group, and definitely not a guy that will fuck this team over in the third act, Albert Wesker, tells his remaining flock to investigate a rogue gunshot on the other side of his creepy abode. So we head towards the dining room and quickly find a patch of blood on the floor, and if you are playing as Jill, which is a dumb assumption because of course you are, your partner, Barry's pin-sharp detective work is second to his dad jokes.
What is it?
Blood. Jill, see if you can find any other clues. Hope this is not Chris's blood.
And with that stunning observation, we are finally let off the leash to explore the next room. The door slowly opens to raise the tension and not mask the loading times. Pinky swear. We fade up to be greeted with an unassuming corridor. Huh, well that was disappointing. Let's go over here and... Oh no! Oh god, yeah, let's go back to the dining room. But oh no, our shambling friend wants to give Jill a hug.
Let me take care of this.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, renowned marksman Barry Burton. Anyway, the pair heads back to the foyer to report these findings back to Wesker, and shock horror, he's done a Houdini. So of course they do the horror movie trope of splitting up and trying to track him down. And this is where we finally get a taste of what Resident Evil truly is. For all its creepy bluster, Biohazard's main loop is all about exploration, with the goal of finding keys and other items to unlock other areas of this mansion, with simple puzzles to break up the pace. But this basic obvious bitch analysis hides the true magic. While the game will give you hints on what to do next, from this point onward, you are free to explore this place with no incentive on anything. And depending on your taste, this is a blessing or a curse. Now, when I first saw this game back in the day over a friend's house, I was in the latter. I loved the atmosphere, but I was still an instant gratification kind of guy. Anyway, back to the game. This freedom to explore the mansion is a ton of fun, and what makes it compelling to me is the strategy you need to use to get through it. Okay, sure, saying that now is silly because I know this game like the back of my hand, but in my chuddy youth, when I first bounced off this shit like David Cage on a waterbed, when my ape brain finally clicked, the moment-to-moment strategy and choice became more satisfying than the obvious. Okay, that still feels great, but shut up Jerry, I'm getting to my point. Health, ammo, even items you need to save your game are in short supply. Yes, even something as mundane as marking your progress needs currency. And if you are a paranoid android and burn all your ink ribbons to then cark it, well, you're going all the way back to your last save. That's right, Resident Evil is the Dark Souls are back on subject. The voice acting, on the other hand, is special. But instead of the usual game reviewer bollocks that just lampoons this aspect without going further, I do have a theory as to why the dialogue in Resident Evil is so uncanny. It's not for us. Yes, it's in English, and yes, we understand the words being said, but this script reeks of giving its native audience a sense of gravitas over this.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close.
You were almost a jibble sandwich.
And if you are aware of Japanese culture, or like me, you spend a shocking amount of time watching abroad in Japan, you will quickly find out that this frilly approach to our tongue is slapped on everything to give it some kind of prominence. And it's fucking ridiculous. I mean, would you want to buy a boring, probably soggy, definitely flaccid baguette, or do you want to purchase a nice stick?
I suppose they've got a point. Who can't honestly say they love the taste of nice stick?
You got that right. While I can wax nostalgic over this word jank, on further research, this vocal butt sauce was apparently accidental, as the director of Resident Evil, Shinji Mikami, noted in many interviews over his inspirations were George Romero's Dawn of the Dead and his salty disappointment after watching Italian hack Lucio Fulci's Zombie Flesh Eaters. And while the former is a classic flick with all the horror, comedy and social commentary that would make a film nerd spoff his cargo shorts, Flesh Eaters, on the other rotting hand, is 75% the lead actress with her tits out, 5% zombies wrestling sharks, and the last 20% being a dull fucking slog. So I can see why our boy wanted to go full Romero for this interactive spin. But sadly, we are still in the era where actors were being cast because they looked like the character, over having the chops to portray them. So while in his native tongue, he was shooting for Romero, to our ears, he went full Fulci.
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
You're wounded! What kind of demon attacked you?
It was a huge snake, and also poisonous. Ugh.
Poisonous? Oh no. Richard, hold on!
Like I said, this is something I found interesting, and when you look at these performances from this angle, it brings another layer of endearment to me. Let's talk about the music. If there's something that goes above and beyond in this game, it's the OST. While some of the compositions sound a bit creaky, their lo-fi synthy warblings fill the air with unnerving yet alluring tension. The lobby after you return from that scene is like a little peek behind the dread-filled curtain. And sure, the loop is tiny, but it's a great track to put you on edge. Then you start skulking around the mansion, and this little ditty hits you right in the balls. Once again, it uses those MIDI strings making you feel claustrophobic, but this time it's using stereo separation as a 1-2 punch of paranoia. slapping the player around in a basement brawl of dismay. Then add a throbbing bass line that feels like it's stalking you, and it's a track that swells to the point where it's almost unbearable, but then it backs off to let you breathe. It's good shit. And it wouldn't be Resident Evil without the save room theme. Yeah, that's nice. And this was a trendsetter. If you have played a horror game in the last 30 years, chances are you have been soothed by a relaxing bop like this. Or like this. Maybe this. Not this, because it kinda sucks. Or hell, what about one of my favourites, Harmon's theme from Killer 7? And yes, I would sleep with Masafumi Takada if he returned my emails. And I would be remiss if I didn't give you my underrated pick. And this is just scratching the surface. Hell, legit artists are making their own takes on the save room theme, away from these games. And sure, you could probably just write these off as just ambient tracks, but if you think about it this way, it's no longer a trope or a callback, it's a genre onto itself. And even with these mood setters, apart from Dino Crisis, Colt Python to My Head, the original soundtrack composed by Masami Ueda, who would do the OSTs for Resident Evil 2 and 3, will always be my favourite. And this track in particular hits the hardest after long stretches of terror. It's a subtle yet perfect melody, with the strings plucking away the tension. But then, that pit in your gut grows again, when you know what's on the opposite side of that door. Also, do you know that sting when you select a character at the start of the game? This is called Into the World of Survival Horror. And yeah, it sure sounds like it.
Bizarre murder cases have recently occurred in Raccoon City.
Wait, is that a typo on the first frame? Well, friendship ended with Resident Evil, now Overblood is my new best friend. This grammatical cock-up is from the dual-shock version of the director's cut of Resident Evil, and more on this turd in a sec. And while the original Resi was a smash hit in 1996, the reason why we got not one but two director's cuts was due to the Western port of Biohazard being balked because of game rentals. However, what people were disappointed about in OGRE was the censorship, which is ironic because the European version of Resident Evil was far more violent than the Japanese one. Video games are weird. However, this point of contention was more about the opening intro, and yeah, sure, we now have access to the Japanese version, and fan-made mods that put the uncensored version from the PC release in colour back into the international releases. But when you compare the originals side by side, you can really see how butchered the Western cut is. And one of the most obvious edits is the intro to our favourite Juicehead, who gets this awkward montage within a montage to obscure the fact that he's lighting a smoke. But in this version, you can still hear him spark it up.
Chris Redfield.
Yeah, it's a little weird. And I know I'm being nitpicky, but yeah, I can see why people were up in arms about this in '96. So the following year, Capcom was going to do us a solid and release the director's cut of Resident Evil, with all the stuff trimmed out because of the rental bullshit like auto-aim put back in, as well as a fully uncensored intro.
Bizarre murder cases have recently occurred in Raccoon City.
Wait, this is still censored? They lied to us? Come on, guys. But then a year later we got the DualShock version, and that intro was censored as well, with the added bonus of typos. So yeah, they made a contentious problem even worse. Very Capcom. Also, if you play a tank-controlled game with an analog stick, you're fucking dead to me. I could go on with a dearth of changes found in these revisions, but I can't be arsed, as Biohazard scholar Lotus Prince has a fantastic video on those deets. Links below. The reason why I'm mentioning the dual cock director schlock is due to its brand new original soundtrack by, in massive sarcasm quotes, composer Marumu Sakaguchi. And oh my god, talk about taking and let's be brutal here, rinky-dinky appropriate score that punched way above its weight class and changed it to this.
Wesker! Help me look for him, Jill. And don't leave this hall for the time being.
Yeah, this OST is a complete disaster. It toots when it should doot, the tracking of the instruments is out of sync, and while I'm struggling to find the adjectives to describe this crap, you cannot escape from its orchestra of farts. Just as you think it's going to be okay, the creepy mood will be enhanced by the music. Nope. There it is. Alright, okay, of course I'm blueballing you. I know what you want to hear. You want that theme. Okay, you masochistic nerds, I'll play it for you if you let me show my shite. Deal? Well, tough shit, I'm doing it anyway. What a banger. And by banger, I mean a car wreck. Its overlapping brown noise is like a landfill of colostomy bags being fed into a wood chipper, and if I was responsible for this audio abortion, I would have faked my deafness too. Okay, sure. Scatological jokes aside, this track was made with MIDI, and one fault in the code can turn your hard work into this prolapse. Whatever, memes are memes, and this track will forever be a beacon of bad music. Also, I don't know about you, listening to it for extended periods makes me feel nauseous, so yeah, let's move on. With all that said, the original director's cut, not the cursed one, was my first playthrough of Resident Evil back in the day. if you count back in the day as 2001, when I found a used copy at my local game station for £5. I was in the middle of my replays of the classic games on the GameCube, and even though I was kind of apprehensive with playing the original game because I violently disliked it when I first saw it, its charms finally revealed itself, and yeah, it took nearly 5 years after the fact. It did reel me in, and while I gave him shit earlier, I actually preferred Chris's campaign over Jill's. In fact, the director's cut is just a 15 cheese platter of cool shit, like the arrange mode, which is basically a randomizer mod before that was even a thing. But that's not all, because this mode has new camera angles and tons of other tweaks that change the game for, in my opinion, the better. And sure, we're spoiled now because I can just fire up the PC version with the classic Rebirth mod made by Gemini. I still go back to REDC for a quick hit, and if you want to, you can consider this the first remaster. Which is funny because 5 years later, Resident Evil got a remake on the GameCube, and then another remaster on the DS 10 years later, and now it's rumoured that the remake is getting another remake.
Even though the previous remake got a remaster, and that remaster was later remastered to be a definitive version of the remake.
But let's not forget the other remake that defined the original remake remade.
And then defined what it was to redo it with tacked on console bullshit. And the crowd said both selector. Okay, that's enough of that silliness. It's now time to talk about the story. So yeah, it's spoiler time. So click on the time code to skip. Why am I even bothering with a fucking spoiler section in Resident Evil? Alright, to cut to the chase, the story of Resident Evil is gloriously dumb. And that is the end of the spoiler section. However, the world building through notes and visual clues is doing the heavy lifting, and while the little fables within are not world shattering, it shines a light on the Romero peeled stuff, and I wanted to go into it a little bit more. And as we quickly find out, surprise to no one, it turns out that this mansion in the middle of nowhere is actually a secret laboratory for a pharmaceutical company called Umbrella, and through notes and other scribbles dotted around the place, we get a window into the daily life of these blueberries who work at this shit heap. And here, in the Dogkeeper's journal, we get a grim account of the conditions. Over this 9-day account, it documents the initial outbreak of the T-virus, and the cascade of crap in its aftermath. Infected with this disease, our subject slowly turns into a monster, with his diary ending with our subject killing one of his colleagues, and devouring his corpse, with this horrifying note ending with the line, "Itchy, tasty." A disconcerting tale indeed, and it gives this world a brevity not many games this ilk would dare portray. But then, you realise this guy who had this brutal end is now lying in a pool of his own blood, cause you just shot him. And yeah, that is a wet towel flick to love spuds. I wasn't expecting, but I find this optional story absolutely fascinating, and that quote is a perfect creepy echo that plays on your mind. Well, it does for me anyway. Because then you have to contend with the other side of this thematic coin. If you beat the PC version, you unlock either the Uzi with infinite ammo for Jill, or the light machine gun for Chris, which once again fully leans into his meatheadedness, where you hoe shit down with his chugging death cock. And I don't really want to go into a rant about how Resident Evil has always been about action and heavily leaning on its spectacle, but I have to say, this does make me chuckle. It wants the Romero, but there's the Fulci. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. But then, when we get slapped out of this haze of nostalgia, we have to come to realization that the main thread is so cheesy, it would make rodents lactose intolerant. And I'm teasing, of course, but for all its pomposity, the main thread is almost non-existent, until it blasts all the story at you deep in the late game, like a student waking up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night, remembering they have an exam first thing in the morning. Yeah, it's a tad rushed, such as Wesker being behind the creation of the T-virus, and bringing the members of STARS to the mansion to be test subjects. Also at the same time, he moonlighted as the leader of a special task force, because he needed a hobby? Because making a virus that can kill millions and that same virus being able to make 8-foot tall clawed fucks is just for vibes, I guess. And holy shit, Mikami, take your fucking Ritalin. So yeah, that's a lot of stuff being blasted at you in a short space of time. Hell, most of that info from that previous sentence is in a single cutscene. And it's crazy that we can go from itchy tasty to all of that fucking nonsense. And yeah, like I said already, Resident Evil is and forever will be dumb, and I love it for that fact. But this sloppy storytelling is just another example of a collection of creatives not quite hitting the mark in certain aspects. Of course, you could boil this down to being lost in translation, because like I said, the dub is not for English speakers. But that's a lot. That is insane. So yeah, that was a short rant on Resident Evil, and for all its quirks, I love it. It has a perfect balance of silliness that makes it such a joy to play, with every facet becoming iconic in its own right. While it may not have been the first survival horror game, and arguably not the best, it certainly put its flag into the blood-soaked ground. It's the one that set the mood and a bar for every title to jump over, or like some examples, completely nosedive in glorious fashion. It's a game I had no respect for back in '96, but the more I play it through the decades, the more I fall in love with it. And while I know some of you want that hardcore analytical shit, sadly this one is too close to my heart to give it nothing more than a good piss take. And besides, if you wanted a revision of Biohazard without the cheese, you have the remake, which is a beast on its own and deserves its own video. But that's a conversation for another time. When you spend half your life thinking about a certain thing, it makes you want to lie down and ice that midlife crisis.